Most people believe that becoming magnetic means adding something to who they are. More confidence, more charm, more stories, more effort. But the harder you try to be liked, the more distant people often feel. They sense the tension. They hear the performance, and without realizing it, they pull away. This audiobook is not about tricks, techniques, or personality hacks. It is about removing the quiet behaviors that drain your presence and replacing them with calm, grounded clarity. Because real magnetism doesn't come from trying. It comes from being settled inside yourself. I want to start with a personal story. A close friend of mine used to walk into every room with one silent question running through his mind. Do they like me? He was thoughtful, kind, and intelligent, but constantly exhausted. He talked too much, explained too much, and tried too hard to keep conversations alive. When he left social situations, he didn't feel connected. He felt depleted. The turning point didn't come from learning how to impress people. It came when he stopped chasing approval altogether. He began speaking more slowly. He allowed silence to exist. He stopped filling every gap with words. And something unexpected happened. People leaned in. They listened. They opened up. Without changing his personality, he changed his energy. That shift is what this audiobook is about. Not becoming louder, not becoming more entertaining, but becoming steady, becoming someone others feel calm around, someone whose presence feels safe instead of demanding. If you've ever felt invisible in conversations, drained after social interactions, or frustrated that your kindness goes unnoticed, you're not broken. You're likely just trying too hard in a world that rewards grounded calm. Most people are overwhelmed. They don't want more stimulation. They want relief. Across the next 8 chapters, we will walk through simple but powerful shifts you can make immediately. You'll learn how to stop performing and start connecting, how to speak less but mean more, how to let go of approval seeking without becoming cold or distant, and how to create a presence that naturally draws people in without effort or force. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you are when you're not anxious, rushed, or trying to prove your worth. That version of you is already enough. It has always been enough. You may not realize it yet, but people are already responding to you in subtle ways. They notice your pace, your tone, your comfort with yourself. Magnetism is rarely loud. It's felt. It shows up when you stop managing impressions and start respecting your own space. When you give yourself permission to be quiet, present, and real, you give others permission to do the same. That mutual ease is where connection begins, and it's something you can practice every single day. With patience, consistency, and awareness, this approach reshapes how relationships form, deepen, and endure over time without forcing outcomes or betraying who you are. As you listen, don't rush. Let the ideas settle. Notice what resonates. And if this message feels like something a friend in your life needs right now, someone who's tired of trying so hard just to be accepted, take a moment at the end of this intro to share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need to begin changing their life. Chapter 1. Stop trying to impress. Most people never notice the exact moment they give their power away. It happens quietly, usually with good intentions. You walk into a conversation and immediately start adjusting yourself. Your voice shifts, your posture changes, your mind begins scanning for the right thing to say. Somewhere inside, a question appears. How do I come across right now? That question alone is enough to move you out of presence and into performance. Trying to impress feels productive, but it creates distance. The harder you work to be interesting, the less real the interaction becomes. People don't consciously analyze this, but they feel it. Effort has a texture. It carries tension, and tension is not inviting. I saw this clearly through a close friend of mine. For years, he believed connection was something you earned by being impressive. He thought that if he could just say the right thing, tell a better story, or show more personality, people would finally see his value. On the surface, he seemed social and confident. Underneath, every interaction felt like an exam he had to pass. He talked fast. He filled silences immediately. He explained his thoughts twice, sometimes 3 times, just to make sure they landed well. After conversations, he replayed everything in his head, wondering what he could have said differently. He wasn't enjoying people. He was managing them, and management is exhausting. What he didn't realize then is something most people miss. Connection doesn't grow from effort. It grows from ease. When you try to impress, part of your attention is always turned inward. You monitor yourself instead of the moment. You listen just enough to respond well, not deeply enough to understand. This split focus is subtle, but it's powerful. People sense when you are not fully there, even if they can't explain why. The shift for my friend began during a period of quiet frustration. He wasn't angry or dramatic about it. He was simply tired. Tired of trying. Tired of performing. Tired of leaving rooms feeling invisible despite doing everything he thought he was supposed to do. One day, he made a small decision that changed everything. He stopped trying to be impressive for one conversation. He spoke less, not as a tactic, but as a release. He allowed pauses to exist without rushing to fill them. He let stories end naturally instead of stretching them for effect. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable, almost dangerous. But then something unexpected happened. The conversation didn't fall apart. It slowed down, and in that slower rhythm, people leaned in. Impressing people requires constant effort. Presence requires none. When you stop trying to impress, your body relaxes. Your breathing steadies. Your voice drops into its natural range. You're no longer pushing energy outward, hoping for approval. You're simply there. That grounded presence is rare in a world addicted to noise, and rarity creates attraction. This doesn't mean becoming boring or withdrawn. It means removing unnecessary performance. You don't need to add value to every second of an interaction. You don't need to prove your intelligence, your kindness, or your worth. Most people are already overwhelmed. They're not craving stimulation, they are craving relief. My friend noticed something surprising as he continued this shift. The less he tried to impress, the more others opened up. People spoke longer. They shared more honestly. They seemed calmer around him. He realized that when he stopped trying to be interesting, others felt interested in his presence. That is real magnetism. Not drawing attention to yourself, but creating space where others feel safe to exist. Trying to impress also sends a quiet signal of need. Even when it's subtle, it communicates, I want something from you. Approval, validation, acceptance, and neediness, no matter how well disguised, weakens attraction. People instinctively move away from pressure, even gentle pressure. One of the most powerful changes my friend made was learning to end sentences earlier. He stopped over-explaining. He stopped adding extra words to soften his points. He trusted that what he said was enough. When he finished a thought, he let it land. He didn't rush to justify it. That silence did more work than any clever phrasing ever had. Silence after a statement communicates confidence. Silence after a story communicates self-trust. When you allow your words to stand alone, you signal that you believe in them. When you rush to fill space, you signal doubt. Most people don't consciously register this difference, but they respond to it instinctively. They lean towards certainty and pull away from tension. To practice this, start small. In your next conversation, reduce how much you speak by 20%. Say the core idea, then stop. Let the moment breathe. If silence appears, don't panic. Stay present. Watch what happens. Often, the other person naturally continues when you don't force momentum. Another habit to release is self-enhancement. You don't need to upgrade stories to sound impressive. You don't need to have one-up experiences. You don't need to demonstrate how much you know to prove you belong. A simple acknowledgement often carries more weight than a polished response. My friend once told me the hardest part of this process wasn't learning new behaviors. It was resisting the urge to add more. He had to unlearn the belief that connection is earned through effort. In truth, connection forms when effort dissolves. People are not drawn to those who try to shine. They are drawn to those who are steady enough not to need the spotlight. Steadiness feels safe. It feels grounded. And in a chaotic world, safety is deeply attractive. When you stop trying to impress, you reclaim your center. You speak from it. You listen to it. You move from it. Others feel that stability and respond to it naturally. Not with instant admiration, but with trust. And trust is far more powerful than attention. This is the first step in becoming a people magnet without trying too hard. Let go of performance. Let go of the need to be impressive. What remains is presence, and presence is where real connection begins. Chapter 2. Calm is the new charisma. Most people think charisma looks like energy, big gestures, fast words, strong opinions delivered with confidence. That image has been reinforced for years by loud personalities and dramatic leadership styles. But if you look closely at the people who truly draw others in, you'll notice something very different. They are not rushed. They are not reactive. They are calm. Calm is not the absence of personality. Calm is the presence of control. In a world where everyone is overstimulated, emotional steadiness feels rare, and rarity creates value. When someone remains grounded while everything around them feels chaotic, people instinctively move closer, not because they are entertained, but because they feel regulated. I watched this transformation happen with the same friend I mentioned earlier. After he stopped trying to impress, there was still one habit quietly draining his presence: emotional urgency. He reacted quickly. He laughed too fast. He agreed too quickly. Even when he spoke less, his energy still felt slightly rushed, as if he were afraid of losing the moment. What he didn't understand yet was that magnetism doesn't come from speed. It comes from pace. The shift began when he learned to slow his internal reactions, not suppress them, but delay them. He practiced taking a brief pause before responding, not long enough to feel awkward, just long enough to regain choice. That pause changed everything. His voice softened. His words became deliberate. His expressions felt more intentional. People noticed immediately. They began to mirror his pace. Conversations slowed. Interruptions decreased. Others listened more carefully, not because he demanded attention, but because his calm created it. Calm communicates safety. When someone is emotionally regulated, their nervous system sends a clear signal. Nothing is urgent here. Nothing is threatening. Nothing needs to be forced. That signal is deeply reassuring, especially to people who live in a constant state of pressure. They may not be able to explain why they enjoy being around you, but they feel better after spending time with you. That feeling is the foundation of charisma. Many people confuse calm with weakness. They believe that if they don't react quickly or strongly, they'll be overlooked or dismissed. In reality, the opposite is true. Reactivity makes you predictable. Calm makes you intriguing. When you don't rush to agree, people wonder what you're thinking. When you don't rush to speak, your words carry more weight. When you don't rush to react, your presence feels grounded. My friend noticed that as he became calmer, he didn't need to compete for attention. Attention naturally found him. In group settings, he spoke less, but when he did, the room quieted slightly. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough to be felt. His calm created contrast. Contrast is what draws the eye. Another important realization came when he stopped trying to manage other people's emotions. Before, he felt responsible for keeping conversations upbeat, smooth, and comfortable. If there was tension or silence, he rushed to fix it. That constant emotional caretaking kept him anxious and drained. When he let go of that responsibility, something unexpected happened. Conversations became more authentic. People shared more honestly. Silence stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling neutral. He realized that calm isn't about controlling the room. It's about controlling yourself. Charisma built on calm does not demand attention. It invites it. This is why calm confidence outlasts loud confidence. Loud confidence depends on performance. Calm confidence depends on self-trust. One requires constant energy, the other generates it. To begin practicing this shift, start with your reaction speed. Notice how quickly you respond to comments, questions, or jokes. Ask yourself whether your response is chosen or automatic. Then experiment with slowing down just slightly. Let a breath pass before you speak. Let your face settle before you react. Let your body relax instead of leaning forward. That small delay sends a powerful message. You are not controlled by the moment. Voice plays a major role here as well. Calm people tend to speak more slowly and at a lower volume, not because they are quiet, but because they are unhurried. Speed often signals nervousness. Slowness signals certainty. When you speak slowly, you give your words time to land. You also give others permission to slow down with you. My friend practiced this intentionally. He focused on finishing sentences without rushing the last word. He allowed natural pauses between thoughts. At first, it felt strange, like he was losing momentum. But over time, he realized the momentum hadn't disappeared. It had shifted. Instead of pushing energy outward, he was drawing people in. Calm also shows in how you handle disagreement. Reactive people defend themselves quickly. Calm people listen fully. They don't rush to correct or justify. They let differing views exist without feeling threatened. That emotional security is deeply attractive because it signals strength without aggression. This doesn't mean you avoid expressing opinions. It means you don't attach your identity to being right. When your sense of self isn't on the line, you remain relaxed. And relaxation, paradoxically, gives your words more authority. Another subtle change my friend made was in his facial expressions. He stopped over-communicating agreement or excitement. He allowed neutral expressions to exist, not cold, not distant, just present. This neutrality made his moments of warmth more meaningful. When he smiled, it felt earned. When he laughed, it felt genuine. Calm creates contrast, not just in behavior, but in emotion. It's important to understand that calm charisma is not something you perform. You can't fake it consistently. It comes from reducing internal noise, from letting go of the need to be approved of at every moment, from trusting that you don't need to rush to secure a connection. People are drawn to those who are comfortable in themselves. That comfort is contagious. As you practice calm, you may notice something else shift. You'll feel less drained after social interactions. That's because you're no longer spending energy managing impressions or emotions. You're simply present. Presence costs less than performance. Calm doesn't mean passive. It means grounded. It means you choose when to engage and how deeply. It means your reactions are intentional, not impulsive. Over time, this steadiness becomes your signature. People begin to associate you with clarity, ease, and emotional safety, and that association is powerful. In the next chapter, we'll explore how speaking less, but with intention, gives your words weight, and why restraint often communicates more confidence than expression ever could. Chapter 3. Say less, mean more. One of the biggest myths about communication is that impact comes from saying more explanation, more detail, more words to make sure you're understood. In reality, the opposite is almost always true. The people whose words carry the most weight are rarely the ones who speak the most. They are the ones who know when to stop. Weight is created by restraint. Most people dilute their presence without realizing it. They make a good point, then soften it. They say something meaningful, then explain it again from another angle. They add examples, disclaimers, and justifications, not because the message is unclear, but because they're afraid of being misunderstood or rejected. Each extra sentence feels safe, but together they weaken the message. I saw this pattern clearly in my friend before his shift began. He believed clarity required thoroughness. If he had an opinion, he explained the background. If he told a story, he filled in every detail. If he made a decision, he justified it. His words were thoughtful, but they were heavy in the wrong way. They crowded the space instead of shaping it. When he started working on calm, the next realization came naturally. He didn't need to say everything he thought. He only needed to say what mattered. At first, this felt like holding back. He worried that speaking less would make him seem uninterested or uninvolved. But the result was the opposite. The fewer words he used, the more attention each one received. People leaned in slightly. They waited instead of interrupting. They asked follow-up questions instead of moving on. This is the power of selectivity. When you speak less, you force your words to work harder. Each sentence must justify its existence. This naturally leads to clearer thinking. You begin to filter before you speak instead of sorting it out afterward. That internal filter is what people feel as intelligence and confidence. Saying less also changes how others participate. In conversations where one person fills all the space, there's no room for engagement. Others become listeners instead of contributors. But when you leave space, people step into it. They clarify, they reflect, they connect. My friend noticed this most in group settings. Before, he tried to contribute, often to stay relevant. After the shift, he waited. He listened fully. When he finally spoke, he didn't summarize everything. He offered one clear observation. That single contribution often redirected the conversation more than his previous 10 comments ever had. Less noise creates more signals. One practical change he made was ending sentences sooner. He stopped wrapping ideas in extra context. Instead of saying, "What I'm trying to say is," he simply said the thing. Instead of explaining why he thought something, he stated it calmly and let it stand. This wasn't arrogance. It was trust. Trust that his words were enough. Trust that he didn't need to manage how they landed. Trust that silence didn't mean failure. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is framing. When you stop talking, you frame what you just said as complete. You allow others to absorb it. You create a moment of gravity. People often mistake that pause for confidence because confidence isn't rushed. It doesn't scramble to fill space. It assumes its presence is justified. Another habit my friend dropped was immediate clarification. If someone misunderstood him slightly, he didn't rush to correct every detail. He let the conversation breathe. Often, the misunderstanding resolved itself, and when it didn't, a simple correction later carried more weight than frantic clarification in the moment. This taught him something important. Not every misunderstanding is a threat. Some are just part of human interaction. When you treat them as emergencies, you communicate insecurity. When you treat them calmly, you communicate stability. Saying less also means choosing moments carefully. You don't need to respond to every comment. You don't need to react to every opinion. Silence can be a response. A nod can be a response. Presence can be a response. When you stop feeling obligated to speak, your words become intentional instead of habitual. People who speak compulsively often believe silence makes them disappear. In reality, unnecessary speech makes you invisible. It blends into background noise. Intentional speech stands out. Think about the people you remember most clearly. They're rarely the loudest. They're the ones whose words arrived fully formed and then stopped. Their sentences felt complete. They didn't trail off into insecurity. They didn't overstay their welcome. My friend also noticed how saying less reduced his anxiety. He no longer felt pressure to perform or entertain. He listened more deeply because he wasn't preparing his next line. Listening stopped being a pause between speaking and became the main activity. This shift alone transformed how people experienced him. When someone feels truly heard, they associate that feeling with the person who gave it to them. There's also an emotional discipline required here. Sometimes the urge to speak isn't about contribution. It's about soothing yourself. Filling silence can be a way to manage nervousness. Explaining can be a way to manage fear. Talking can be a way to stay in control. Learning to say less means learning to sit with those impulses without acting on them. That discipline builds internal strength. To practice this, begin with one simple rule. Say the point, then stop. Notice how often you want to add something extra. When that urge appears, pause instead. Let the moment exist without intervention. Over time, that pause will stop feeling risky and start feeling powerful. Another exercise is to answer questions more directly. Instead of circling the answer, give it cleanly. Short answers are not rude when they are calm. They signal clarity. If more detail is needed, it will be asked for. Trust that. As my friend continued this practice, his presence changed again. People described him as thoughtful, grounded, and clear. Not because he spoke often, but because when he did, his words landed. He had learned that meaning is not created by volume, it's created by precision. Say less, meaning more. Let your words breathe. In the next chapter, we'll explore something even more uncomfortable for many people. Learning to be at ease with silence, and why silence, when held calmly, creates depth that words alone never can. Chapter 4. Comfort with silence creates. Depth, silence, is one of the most misunderstood elements of human connection. Most people experience it as a problem to solve. The moment a conversation slows or pauses, an internal alarm goes off. Say something, fix this, keep it moving. That reflex is so ingrained that silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. But what most people don't realize is this. Discomfort with silence is not a communication issue. It is a self-trust issue. Depth begins where the need to fill space ends. I saw this clearly in my friend during the next phase of his change. He had learned to speak less. He had slowed his pace. But silence still made him uneasy. Even when he wasn't trying to impress, he felt a subtle urge to rescue conversations from quiet moments. A pause felt like failure, like disconnection, like he was about to be forgotten. That belief is common, and it's wrong. Silence does not break connection. Poorly managed silence does. There is a difference between awkward silence and grounded silence. One is filled with anxiety, the other is filled with presence. People don't run from silence itself. They run from the tension inside it. When my friend began paying attention to this, he noticed something important. The discomfort wasn't coming from the other person, it was coming from him. From his own impatience. From the fear that if he didn't act, something would be lost. What he was really afraid of was being unneeded. So instead of fighting silence, he practiced staying with it. At first, it felt unnatural. Conversations would pause and his mind would rush to generate something useful or entertaining. But instead of acting on that impulse, he stayed still. He kept his posture relaxed. He maintained gentle eye contact. He let his face remain neutral and open. He did nothing. And in that nothing, something changed. The other person often spoke next. Sometimes they shared something more personal. Sometimes they reflected on what had just been said. Sometimes they simply took a breath and continued. The silence created space, and in that space, depth appeared. Not every time, but often enough to notice a pattern. Silence invites truth. When you fill every gap with words, you control the direction of the interaction. When you allow silence, you give control back to the moment. That surrender is what allows conversations to move beyond surface-level exchange. People need space to access what they actually think and feel. Silence provides that access. Another shift my friend noticed was internal. When he stopped rushing to fill the silence, his body relaxed. His breathing slowed, his shoulders dropped. He felt less responsible for the emotional flow of the interaction. That alone reduced a significant amount of social anxiety he didn't even realize he was carrying. Many people believe they are responsible for keeping conversations alive. That belief creates pressure. Pressure creates tension. Tension kills depth. Comfort with silence communicates confidence. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that says, I don't need to force anything here. That message is deeply reassuring. It tells the other person they are not being evaluated or rushed. It tells them they can show up as they are. Silence also changes how your words are received. When you speak into silence instead of over noise, your words feel intentional. They land more clearly. They stay longer. Silence acts like a frame around your speech, giving it shape and meaning. My friend began using silence intentionally, not as a tactic, but as a natural part of interaction. After making a point, he would stop. He wouldn't rush to add examples or soften the message. He would let it sit. Sometimes the other person nodded. Sometimes they thought. Sometimes they responded slowly, but whatever came next felt more real. This also revealed something important about listening. True listening requires silence, not just silence of the mouth, but silence of the mind. When you are waiting to speak, you are not fully listening. When you are comfortable with silence, you hear more. You notice the tone. You notice hesitation. You notice what isn't said. Depth grows in those details. Another fear people have around silence is judgment. They worry that if they stop talking, they will be seen as boring, awkward, or disengaged. In reality, calm silence is often interpreted as thoughtfulness, as emotional maturity, as strength. People who can sit quietly without fidgeting or apologizing for the pause signal that they are at ease with themselves. That ease is magnetic. It's important to understand that this kind of silence is not withdrawal. You are not checking out. You are checking in. You are fully present without needing to prove it through words. Your attention is steady. Your energy is contained. That containment is what creates depth. My friend also learned to stop narrating his internal process. Before, he would say things like, "I'm just thinking," or "let me see how to say this." Those phrases came from discomfort with silence. Once he dropped them, the pauses became cleaner, more confident. He trusted that he didn't need to explain the pause. The pause could exist on its own. Silence also plays a powerful role in emotional moments. When someone shares something vulnerable, rushing to respond can feel dismissive, even if the intention is supportive. A moment of quiet acknowledgement often communicates more care than immediate advice or reassurance. It says, "I'm with you. I'm not rushing past this." This is where depth becomes connection. To practice this, begin by noticing your impulse to fill space. Don't judge it, just observe it. Then experiment with staying quiet for one extra breath. Let that breath pass before you speak. Over time, increase the space slightly. You'll begin to feel the difference between anxious silence and grounded silence. Another simple practice is to allow silence after the other person finishes speaking. Don't jump in immediately. Let their words settle. This shows respect and attention. It also often encourages them to continue, revealing more than they initially intended to say. As my friend grew more comfortable with silence, his relationships changed again. Conversations became slower but richer. Fewer words were exchanged, but more was understood. People described the feeling seen and heard around him, even though he was speaking less than ever. That is the paradox of silence. When held with calm, it amplifies connection instead of diminishing it. Depth does not come from constant exchange. It comes from a shared presence. Silence is the doorway to that presence. When you stop fearing it, you stop skating on the surface of interactions. You begin to touch something real. In the next chapter, we'll explore another behavior that quietly destroys magnetism, chasing approval, and how letting go of the need to be liked creates a level of respect that effort never achieves. Chapter 5. Stop chasing. Approval. Approval is one of the quiet forces that shapes how people behave, speak, and relate to others. It often hides behind politeness, kindness, and flexibility, which makes it difficult to recognize. Most people don't think of themselves as approval-seeking. They think they're being considerate, easygoing, adaptable. But underneath those traits, there is often a subtle fear at work, the fear of being disliked, rejected, or excluded. That fear is expensive. I saw this clearly in my friend before his transformation fully took hold. Even after learning to speak less and become comfortable with silence, there was still something holding his presence back. He still adjusted himself to keep people comfortable. He still said yes when he wanted to say no. He still softened opinions he believed in. His calm was real, but it was fragile because it depended on being accepted. Approval seeking doesn't look dramatic. It looks reasonable. It sounds like a compromise. It feels like harmony. But over time, it erodes respect, both from others and from yourself. When you chase approval, you place other people in the position of judge. You wait for cues. You scan faces. You measure reactions. Your behavior becomes reactive instead of grounded. Even if you hide it well, people sense that you are negotiating your worth in real time. My friend began to notice this pattern when he felt resentment creeping in. He would agree to things he didn't want, then feel quietly frustrated later. He would hold back honest thoughts, then feel unseen. That resentment was a signal. It was telling him that he was abandoning himself to stay connected. Real magnetism cannot be built on self-abandonment. The shift came when he made a simple but uncomfortable decision. He would stop managing how others felt about him. Not by becoming rude or distant, but by becoming honest and consistent. If he didn't agree, he wouldn't pretend to. If he didn't have energy, he wouldn't force it. If something didn't align with him, he would say so calmly and clearly. At first, this felt risky. He worried people would pull away. Some did. But something else happened too. The people who stayed began treating him differently. They listened more closely. They respected his time. They trusted his eyes because they knew it wasn't automatic. Approval seeking creates cheap yeses. Self-respect creates meaningful ones. One of the most powerful realizations he had was that being liked is not the same as being valued. You can be liked for being agreeable and still be overlooked. You can be liked for being flexible and still not be taken seriously. Value comes from consistency, from knowing where someone stands, from trusting that what they say reflects who they are. When you stop chasing approval, you stop over-explaining, you stop apologizing for normal boundaries, you stop cushioning your words to avoid discomfort. Your communication becomes simpler, cleaner, more direct. That clarity feels grounding to others, even if it challenges them at first. Another habit my friend had to unlearn was reflexive agreement. Before, he would nod along automatically, even when he disagreed. That habit came from a desire to keep things smooth. But smoothness without honesty creates shallow connections. Once he began allowing small disagreements to exist, conversations became more real. Respect replaced politeness. Disagreement, when handled calmly, does not push people away. It often anchors them. Stopping approval seeking also meant letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. This was difficult. He wanted people to see his intentions, his nuance, his good heart. But magnetism doesn't require universal understanding. It requires self-alignment. When you know why you do what you do, you don't need constant validation. There is a quiet strength in being okay with being misunderstood. That strength shows up in body language, in tone, in pacing. When you're not seeking approval, your posture is more relaxed. Your voice is steadier. You don't rush to justify yourself. You let your actions speak over time. People feel that steadiness and respond to it. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent or cold. It means becoming selective. You still care. You just don't chase. You don't bend yourself into shapes that aren't yours to fit into rooms that were never meant for you. My friend noticed that as he stopped chasing approval, he felt lighter. Social interactions no longer felt like tests. He didn't replay conversations afterward. He didn't worry as much about how he came across. That mental space freed up energy, and that energy showed. He became more present, more attentive, more real. Ironically, the less he tried to be liked, the more people seemed drawn to him. This is because approval chasing creates tension. Letting go creates ease, and ease is attractive. People trust those who trust themselves. They respect those who set boundaries without aggression. They feel safe around those who are not secretly asking for something. To begin practicing this, start by noticing where you say yes out of habit rather than alignment. Pause before agreeing. Ask yourself whether you truly want to say yes. If the answer is no, Practice declining simply. You don't need long explanations. A calm, respectful no is enough. Another practice is to stop preemptive apologizing. Notice how often you apologize for taking space, asking questions, or expressing needs. Replace apologies with clarity. Instead of "sorry for bothering you," try "I wanted to check in." Small changes like this shift how you see yourself and how others respond to you. Approval is seductive because it feels safe in the moment, but over time, it costs you presence, energy, and respect. When you let go of the need to be liked, you gain something far more valuable: integrity, alignment, inner quiet. And from that quiet, magnetism grows naturally. In the next chapter, we'll explore how grounding yourself in who you are creates a sense of stability that others instinctively trust, and why consistency is one of the most overlooked sources of attraction. Chapter 6. Be grounded in who you are. There is a specific kind of calm that comes from knowing yourself, not knowing everything about yourself, not having perfect clarity or confidence, but having enough internal grounding that you are not constantly adjusting to fit the moment. That grounding is subtle, but people feel it immediately. It shows up in how you move, how you speak, and how you make decisions. And more than any technique or social skill, it creates trust. Many people mistake flexibility for strength. They believe that being adaptable, agreeable, and open to everything makes them easier to be around. In some cases, it does. But when flexibility has no anchor, it becomes unstable. People don't know where you stand. They don't know what you value. And without that consistency, it's hard to feel truly connected. My friend began to understand this after he stopped chasing approval. He noticed that without constant adjustment, something new was required of him. He had to decide who he was when no one was reacting, what he believed when no one was validating it, what mattered to him when there was nothing to gain. That process was quieter and more challenging than learning how to speak or listen. It required honesty. Being grounded doesn't mean being rigid. It means being rooted. Before this shift, my friend often shaped his opinions around the room. If someone disagreed strongly, he softened. If the energy changed, he adapted. He thought this made him considerate. Over time, he realized it made him blurry. People didn't resist him, but they didn't fully trust him either. There was nothing solid to lean on. Grounding began with small decisions. He stopped automatically adjusting his stance to match whoever was speaking. If he agreed, he said so. If he didn't, he stayed quiet or expressed it calmly. He didn't argue. He didn't persuade me. He simply remained consistent. That consistency changed how people responded to him. Consistency feels safe. When someone behaves predictably in the best sense of the word, others relax around them. They don't have to decode hidden motives or shifting positions. They know what to expect. That reliability creates trust, and trust deepens connection far more than charm ever could. Another part of grounding was learning to tolerate discomfort. When you stop adjusting yourself, you inevitably disappoint some people. There will be moments of tension, moments of misunderstanding, moments where silence feels heavier because you didn't rush to smooth things over. My friend had to learn that discomfort was not dangerous. It was simply the cost of integrity. Each time he stayed aligned instead of accommodating, his confidence grew quietly. Not the loud kind that announces itself, but the steady kind that doesn't need reinforcement. He felt less scattered, less reactive. His decisions became easier because they were based on internal reference points instead of external reactions. Being grounded also changed how he spoke about himself. He stopped oversharing personal details to build connection. He didn't narrate his insecurities or explain his choices unless it was relevant. This wasn't secrecy, it was containment. He realized that not everything needed to be shared to be real. Containment creates gravity. People are drawn to those who don't leak energy everywhere. When your thoughts, emotions, and values are held with care, they carry weight. You don't need to broadcast who you are. You demonstrate it through consistency over time. Another subtle shift was in how he handled pressure. When challenged, he didn't rush to defend himself. He paused. He considered. Sometimes he adjusted. Sometimes he didn't. But the choice was deliberate. That deliberateness signaled strength. People stopped pushing as hard because there was nothing reactive to push against. Grounding is not about being unmovable. It's about being intentional. To practice this, start by clarifying a few non-negotiables. Not rules for others, but values for yourself. How do you want to speak? How do you want to treat your time? What kind of energy do you want to bring into interactions? These don't need to be grand declarations. Simple principles are enough. Use them as internal guides. Another practice is to notice when you feel the urge to explain yourself unnecessarily. Often, that urge comes from a fear of being misunderstood. Instead of acting on it, pause. Ask yourself whether the explanation is needed or whether silence would communicate confidence. Over time, you'll begin to trust that your actions speak louder than your clarifications. My friend also learned to separate feedback from identity. When someone disagreed or criticized him, he didn't collapse inward or become defensive. He listened, he considered, he kept what was useful and let the rest pass. That emotional separation allowed him to stay grounded even in challenging moments. Grounded people don't need to win conversations. They don't need to be right all the time. They don't need to prove themselves. They know who they are, and that knowledge acts as an anchor. This grounding changed the quality of my friend's relationships. Fewer people had access to him, but those who did experienced something deeper. They trusted his words. They relied on his presence. They felt steadied by his consistency. He became someone others felt safe building around. That is magnetism at its most sustainable. When you are grounded in who you are, you stop chasing connection and start attracting alignment. You don't bend yourself to fit every space. You let the right spaces find you. That selectivity isn't arrogance. It's clear. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when you stop chasing people altogether and allow connection to form naturally, and why letting others come to you is one of the most powerful shifts you can make without effort or force. Chapter 7. Let others come to you. There is a quiet but profound shift that happens when you stop chasing people, not in a dramatic, resentful way, not by pulling away or becoming distant, but by releasing the internal urgency to pursue connection. That urgency is subtle, and most people mistake it for enthusiasm or openness. In reality, it is pressure, and pressure, even when well-intentioned, weakens magnetism. At this stage of his transformation, my friend had learned to be calm, to speak less, to tolerate silence, and to stay grounded in who he was. Yet there was still one habit that lingered beneath the surface: the impulse to initiate, follow up, check in, and keep momentum alive. He believed that if he didn't reach out, things would fade. If he didn't push slightly, opportunities would be missed. That belief kept him subtly leaning forward in his relationships. Leaning forward feels active, but it also signals imbalance. When you chase, you unconsciously place yourself in a lower position. You are the one seeking, the one investing more, the one monitoring distance. Even if the other person enjoys your presence, the dynamic becomes uneven. Over time, uneven dynamics erode attraction, because attraction thrives on mutual choice, not pursuit. My friend began to question this pattern after noticing how tired it made him. He was always the one initiating plans, sustaining conversations, and reopening doors. He wasn't desperate, but he was available in a way that left no space for others to move toward him. Everything flowed in one direction. So he tried something uncomfortable. He stopped pushing. He didn't disappear. He didn't test people. He simply matched energy instead of exceeding it. If someone reached out, he responded fully. If they didn't, he let the space exist. At first, this felt like doing nothing. It felt passive, even risky. But over time, it revealed something important. Some connections faded. Others strengthened. The ones that faded were built on his effort alone. Without his chasing, there was nothing holding them together. That was painful to see, but also clarifying. The connections that strengthened did so because the other person stepped forward. They initiated. They followed up. They chose him without being prompted. That choice changed everything. Letting others come to you doesn't mean becoming unavailable. It means becoming receptive instead of proactive by default. It means allowing desire to move in both directions. When you stop filling all the space with your effort, you create room for others to invest. That investment is what creates mutual respect. My friend noticed that when he stopped chasing, people treated his time differently. Invitations felt more intentional. Conversations felt more present. When someone reached out, it carried weight because it wasn't guaranteed. He wasn't always there, always available, always initiating. He was there when he was there, and that presence mattered more. Chasing often comes from a fear of loss, the fear that if you don't act, you'll be forgotten. But magnetism isn't built by reminding people you exist. It's built by the impression you leave when you do. When you stop chasing, you stop managing outcomes. You release control over how relationships unfold. That surrender can feel unsettling, especially if you're used to being the one who keeps things alive. But it's also liberating. You no longer carry the emotional labor of maintaining connection alone. This shift also changed how my friend showed up when he was present. Because he wasn't spreading his energy thin, he brought more depth into each interaction. He listened more fully. He spoke more honestly. He wasn't distracted by thoughts of when to follow up or how to keep momentum going. He trusted that if something mattered, it would return. Trust is attractive. Letting others come to you also filters relationships naturally. People who are curious, aligned, and invested will move closer. Those who are passive, inconsistent, or uninterested will drift away. This isn't rejection. It's alignment, and alignment creates ease. Another important realization was that chasing people often masks self-doubt. The belief that you need to pursue to be chosen implies that your presence alone is not enough. When you stop chasing, you challenge that belief directly. You act from the assumption that if someone wants connection, they will meet you halfway. That assumption changes your posture, your tone, your energy. My friend also learned to apply this principle in conversations. He stopped overextending stories to keep people engaged. He stopped asking extra questions to prevent silence. He let interactions end naturally instead of forcing continuation. Those endings created anticipation instead of exhaustion. Endings matter. When you let conversations end cleanly, you leave space for desire to form. Desire needs absence, not disappearance, but space. If everything is always available, nothing feels chosen. When you allow space, people notice what's missing. And when they reach back, it's because they want to, not because you pulled. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It means being warm without chasing, present without clinging, available without hovering. That balance is rare, and rarity increases value. To practice this, begin by noticing where you initiate out of habit rather than intention. Pause before sending the message. Ask yourself whether you're acting from curiosity or from anxiety. If it's anxiety, wait. Let the feeling pass. If the connection is real, it will not disappear in the pause. Another practice is to allow others to set the pace sometimes. Resist the urge to always be the one moving things forward. Let plans form naturally. Let conversations rest. Let people reveal their level of interest through action instead of reassurance. My friend found that this shift brought him unexpected peace. He no longer felt responsible for sustaining every connection. He trusted that what was meant to stay would stay without force. That trust softened him. It made him more relaxed, more confident, more at ease. And people felt that ease. When you stop chasing, you become a place people return to, not a force that pulls them in. You allow attraction to do what it does naturally. You step out of the role of pursuer and into the role of presence. In the final chapter, we'll explore how all of these shifts come together to create the most powerful form of magnetism, becoming someone people feel calm, safe, and themselves around, and why that feeling is what truly lasts. Chapter 8. Become the place people. Feel calm. Around at the deepest level, magnetism has very little to do with what you say or do. It has everything to do with how people feel in your presence. Long after words are forgotten, feelings remain. And the feeling that draws people back again and again is simple, rare, and powerful. Calm. People return to places where their nervous system can rest. By the time my friend reached this final shift, he was no longer trying to change how he came across. He wasn't optimizing conversations. He wasn't monitoring reactions. He wasn't asking himself whether he was doing enough. Instead, he focused on one question. How does it feel to be around me? Not from insecurity, but from responsibility. This question changed everything. He realized that for years, even when he was kind, helpful, and engaging, his presence carried a subtle restlessness, a background hum of effort. He wanted things to go well. He wanted connection. He wanted momentum. That wanting created noise. Now, after letting go of impressing, calming his reactions, speaking less, embracing silence, releasing approval, seeking, grounding himself, and stopping the chase, something different emerged. Stillness, not emptiness, not passivity, but a steady emotional climate that others could enter without bracing themselves. Conversations with him no longer felt like tasks. They felt like pauses, like exhaling after holding your breath all day. This is the most overlooked form of attraction. When people feel calm around you, they associate you with relief, with safety, with clarity. They don't need to perform. They don't need to impress. They don't need to rush. They can be honest without being exposed. That emotional safety is rare, and once someone experiences it, they remember where they felt it. Calm is contagious. My friend noticed that people lingered longer around him without planning to. Conversations didn't need to be exciting to be meaningful. Even shared silence felt comfortable. He didn't fill space with energy. He held space with presence. That distinction made him memorable. Being a place of calm does not mean you never express emotion. It means your emotions are integrated, not spilling. You can be warm without being overwhelming, engaged without being intense, supportive without absorbing everything. That emotional regulation creates boundaries so people can relax inside. One of the clearest signs of this shift was how people spoke around him. Their voices softened. Their pace slowed. They shared things they didn't usually share, not because he asked probing questions, but because his presence signaled it was safe to do so. He wasn't extracting information. He was offering steadiness. People open up when they don't feel rushed toward resolution. This kind of magnetism cannot be faked. It's built through consistency, through showing up the same way on good days and bad, through responding instead of reacting, through listening without needing to fix. Over time, people begin to trust that you won't escalate their emotions or minimize them. The trust is everything. Another realization he had was that calm presence requires self-care. You cannot be a place of calm if you are constantly depleted. Rest, solitude, and boundaries are not luxuries. They are prerequisites. When you respect your own energy, you protect the quality of what you bring into interactions. Magnetism is not about availability. It's about quality of presence. My friend became more selective with his time, not because he thought he was better than others, but because he understood the cost of scattered energy. He chose fewer interactions and made them deeper. That depth made people feel seen, not entertained. And being seen is far more powerful. He also stopped trying to fix people's discomfort. When someone felt awkward, sad, or unsure, he didn't rush to smooth it over. He stayed with them. Calmly, without judgment. That steadiness communicated acceptance. It said, "You don't need to be different here." That message alone creates loyalty. Becoming a place of calm also means accepting that not everyone will resonate with you. Some people are drawn to intensity, drama, and constant stimulation. Let them go. Your calm is not for everyone, and it doesn't need to be. Magnetism is not about mass appeal. It's about resonance. The people who resonate with calm will find you. They will stay, and they will value you deeply. To cultivate this presence, begin by noticing how you feel before, during, and after interactions. If you feel tense beforehand, ask what you're carrying. If you feel drained afterward, ask where you overextended. Use those signals as guidance, not criticism. Adjust gently. Another practice is to slow transitions. Don't rush from one interaction to the next. Give yourself a moment to reset. Calm presence requires internal spaciousness. Create that space intentionally. Also notice how you listen. Are you waiting for your turn, or are you actually receiving what's being said? True listening is felt immediately. It tells the other person they matter without needing to say it out loud. Over time, these small choices accumulate. Your presence becomes recognizable. People begin to associate you with ease, clarity, and emotional safety. They may not say it directly, but they'll show it. They'll return. They'll trust. They'll relax. This is what it means to become a people magnet without trying too hard. Not by adding techniques, not by perfecting charisma, but by removing tension, by simplifying, by becoming someone others feel calm around. When you offer calm, you offer something most people are desperately missing. And when you offer it without expectation, without pressure, without performance, it becomes magnetic. In the end, magnetism is not about drawing people toward you. It's about creating a space they don't want to leave. You've just walked through a different way of relating to people. Not louder, not more impressive, just calmer, clearer, and more honest. If there is one idea to carry with you from this audiobook, let it be this. You do not attract people by effort. You attract them by the state you bring into the room. Throughout these chapters, you saw how magnetism emerges when tension disappears. When you stop trying to impress, your presence settles. When you slow down, people feel safe. When you speak less, your words gain weight. When you allow silence, conversations deepen. When you stop chasing approval, respect appears. When you stay grounded in who you are, trust grows. And when you stop chasing people, connection becomes a choice, not a struggle. None of these shifts require you to become someone else. They ask you to stop abandoning yourself. That is the quiet discipline underneath real confidence. You don't need to sharpen your personality. You need to stop leaking energy through anxiety, explanation, and urgency. What remains is already enough. The friend whose story you followed did not become more charismatic overnight. He became more present. Over time, people began describing him differently. Not exciting, not impressive, but calming, reliable, easy to be around. Those words might sound small, but they describe something powerful. People organize their lives around where they feel at ease. You may notice resistance as you begin applying these ideas. Silence may feel uncomfortable. Not chasing may feel risky. Saying less may feel like you're disappearing. Stay with that discomfort. It is simply your nervous system learning a new rhythm. Nothing important is lost in the pause. In fact, that pause is where clarity forms. Try a simple practice over the next few days. Slow your responses. End conversations cleanly. Let people come to you. Notice how your body feels when you stop forcing connection. Notice how others respond when you give them space instead of pressure. These are not techniques. They are reminders of how connection works naturally. Remember this. People are not drawn to perfection. They are drawn to regulation. They are drawn to those who are comfortable in themselves. When you become that person, you stop chasing attention and start offering something rarer. Relief. If this audiobook resonated with you, it's likely because you're tired of trying so hard to be accepted. You're not wrong for wanting connection. You're just done earning it through effort. Let this be the beginning of a quieter strength. One that doesn't announce itself, but is felt immediately. And if you know someone in your life who is constantly overgiving, over-explaining, or exhausting themselves just to be liked, share this video with them. It may help them stop trying so hard and finally begin improving their life. Carry these lessons gently. There is no deadline to become magnetic. Progress shows up quietly, in calmer mornings, steadier conversations, and fewer regrets after you speak. Choose presence today, then choose it again tomorrow. With repetition, calm becomes your default. When challenges appear, return to breath, pace, and restraint. You are allowed to take up space without noise. You are allowed to be chosen without chasing. This is not withdrawal. It is arrival. Trust the process, honor your limits, and let relationships form naturally, anchored in respect, patience, and the calm strength you now carry forward.